Welcome to my PowerPoint on the most used class cards. So the way that I'm going through this video is that I'm going to be talking about cards that see play in almost every deck for a class, or do, like in some cases, like, well, mining casualties. There's no deck in Wild or in Standard, I guess, as well, but mostly about Wild for this video, that shouldn't be running mining casualties in its Death Knight deck. It's just so powerful. It's a 2-mana spell, summon 2 1/1 Silverhand Recruits with Death Rattle, summon a 1/1 Frail Ghoul. Frail Ghoul, of course, is the token from the Death Knight Hero Power, which is a 1-mana 1/1 Undead with Charge, dies at the end of the turn. Mining Casualties just should go in every Death Knight deck, straight up. It provides a lot of corpses, which, most Death Knight runes, Blood and Frost, aren't that great at generating on their own. It fights incredibly well on board. It's technically overstated because it's 2-mana summon 4/4 in stats. It's really good for if you're going wide on board to give any buffs. It's just such an incredibly powerful card. Mining Casualties, I think that there's not a world in in the future, like in the near future, that this doesn't see play. Like, obviously Death Knight isn't very good in Wild, don't get me wrong, but I mean Paladin also really likes this card as well. But I just don't see a world where even past rotation this stops not being great in like even Death Knight, or in any just Death Knight deck in Wild as they exist. Yeah. Like I said, Death Knight's bad in Wild, right? So it is hard to gauge cards that would see play in every Death Knight deck, especially because Death Knight has the rune system. So it's really hard to pin down cards that are in every Death Knight deck, since, well, because of the runes, there kind of can't be cards like that. And that's one of the biggest issues of Death Knight in Wild, is that the rune system is really holding the deck or the class back. Because, well, it doesn't matter if like they get strong cards if you literally just cannot play them together, because the deck restriction, well, the class just suffers because of it more in Wild than it does in Standard. But there's nothing else that really makes sense to be on this for Death Knight. The class is still very new, and similarly, Demon Hunter. Demon Hunter, again, only 2 decks are playable. Well, okay, I guess were playable after until the nerf, but for Demon Hunter, and when you look at the similarities between the decks, it's really only one card in Mana Burn. 1 mana Fell Spell, your opponent has 2 fewer mana crystals next turn. I think Mana Burn is like easily one of the best cards in the entire game, personally, so it does make sense that every Demon Hunter deck will want to run this, and every Demon Hunter deck should run this. I just think that, like, of the Demon Hunter decks we have seen actually be playable in Wild, there aren't many. It's typically just like aggro decks that also ran Mana Burn, and like Questline, which also runs Mana Burn. It's similar to Death Knight in the way that, like, yeah, there's just not enough cards to really fit this that well, but they do both have one card that does fit this very well. I'm gonna move on though, because there's way more cards to talk about. I pulled about 3, or at least 2 or 3 for every other class, because, well, almost every other class has 2 or 3 cards that are seeing play in almost every single deck for their class. Like Druid, we have Moonlit Guidance, a 2-mana arcane spell. Discover a copy of a card in your deck. If you played it this turn, draw the original. Aquatic Form, a 0-mana spell with Dredge. If you have the mana to play the card this turn, draw it. And Invigorate, 2-mana nature spell. Choose one, gain an empty mana crystal, or draw a card. Almost every single deck, like Druid deck in Wild, runs at least like one of these or 2 of these. If Auctioneer Druid wasn't a thing, I would say almost every single deck should run all 3 of these, but Auctioneer Druid can't really run Invigorate. It typically can run Moonlit Guidance. I haven't played an Auctioneer Druid in a little while, and last lists I did play didn't run Moonlit Guidance, but so I could be wrong on that. They could have replaced it in the time since, but it's been like a year since I've played an Auctioneer Druid, I will be honest. But Aquatic Form, there's no Druid deck that shouldn't be running Aquatic Form. Straight up. There is no Druid deck that should not be running this card. It's 0 mana, draw 1. Even Druid loves this card. Questline Druid loves this card. Like Spell Druid loves this card. Reno Druid loves this card. Dungar Druid, which exists now because of aggro. There's no aggro decks, loves this card. I'm really pissed about that, by the way. Dungar, if aggro didn't just get like completely wiped out of the format, Dungar would still be unplayable. But because they're like, okay, well, you just can't play aggro in Wild anymore, I guess you can just do nothing until like turn 9 and then play Dungar, and it works. So if there's literally nothing that prevents you from playing a 9-mana card that doesn't even do something better than any other card, then yeah, I guess it's pretty good. Anyway, back to these cards. Like, Invigorate is just so useful. It's a better wild growth. It can draw a card later on in the game. It's just so useful for every deck. I've started running it in Even Druid because, like, your turn 2 as Even Druid's already not that good sometimes. So getting to ramp, or at least draw, is really nice. You want to get your combo pieces in Even Druid a lot, so getting, Invigorate helps a lot. Moonlit Guidance, I mean, this card's just been a staple in Druid forever, right? It's, you discover a copy of a spell from your deck. Even if you don't play it, you still got a copy of it, so you do get, well, a copy of it. But if you do play it that turn, you draw the original. So it's 2 mana, get 2 cards, and if it's like a 0 mana card, like Aquatic Form, you just play it right away. Or, Spread the Word is really good with it as well, because that is a 4 mana spell that's draw 2 cards, costs 1 less for each attack your hero has. So you can get a lot of card draw that way. Also an Even Druid. I play primarily Even Druid for Druid decks, let's be real here. And then it's just, these cards are so staples for the Druid class. It's hard to see that, like, a Druid deck not run these. Like, if I ever am building a Druid deck, the first thing I do is I add these cards, right? Like, I add cards that are in the same vein as these. There are other cards that could have probably gone in, like, this slide for Druid as well. Things like Innervate sees a lot of play in a lot of different decks. Branching Paths, I mean, over the years, it could have been Branching Paths or, like, Poison Seed, stuff like that, right? But I wanted to, like, hone in on cards that really do see the most play, instead of just cards that see a lot of play. So it really does feel like these 3 cards for me, for Druid, personally. Like I said, you could make an argument for a bunch of different other cards, but who cares, right? Let's get going to Hunter. So Hunter is really awkward because a lot of Hunter decks are, like, fine-tunedly built to work in certain ways, right? Like, here, like, odd and even decks can't really run the same cards. Questline Hunter has to run different cards. Beast Hunter has to run specific cards. Lion Hunter has to run specific cards. So it's hard for Hunter to have, like, a lot of cards that see play in every deck. But, I mean, it still is cards like Bird Watching and Tracking. There are almost no Hunter decks in the entire game that should not be running Tracking. Just straight up. It's 1 mana, discover a card from your deck. A spell. It's really good. Birdwatching has a few decks that you shouldn't be running it in, I would think, right? Like, it's not that great in, like, Questline Hunter, stuff like that, but it's still really strong. 2 mana, discover a minion from your deck, give all copies of it +2/+1 wherever they are. You primarily use this because it's just so powerful to tutor a specific minion, like your Mystery Egg, like your Shafar, like anything, really. And it's just, how do I put this? Hunter's biggest strength is the fact that it has really powerful tutor cards. Almost no class in the game has tutor cards that are on the same level as Hunter when it comes to tutoring, like, minions, specifically, or getting through its deck without, like pulling too many cards out to get specifically what it wants. That's what Hunter's really good at. And for years, that wasn't good enough, right? Because there weren't enough cards that did that, and there weren't enough cards that specifically wanted to be tutored and not draw other cards from your deck. But then we got cards like Mystery Egg, which synergize super well with Monknethal Lion. So cards like Birdwatching have gone up in value significantly. I mean, it should, I mean, I'm going to be honest with you, when we go through a lot of these slides, they should be pretty obvious what each class, like, you're going to see. The next one is Mage and Ice Block. If you asked me the Mage one, like, a year ago, it would have been a lot of different cards, but Mage has had, like, a lot of nerfs for Wild. Sorcerer's Apprentice got nerfed. Time Warp got nerfed. I guess that kind of is just it. But, so it does change the cards that Mage, has in every deck, because the structure of Mage decks has changed, but it's still pretty similar for all the slow Mage decks. I mean, they're all running Ice Block. Every slow Mage runs Ice Block. They should. Ancient Mysteries goes in every slow Mage deck because it tutors Ice Block. Ancient Mysteries is a 2-mana arcane spell. Withdraw a secret from your deck. It costs 0. Objection sees play in a lot of slow Mage decks as well, for, well, being a good hit off of Ancient Mysteries as well as Ice Block, but typically just because it's really strong, 3-mana secret whenever your opponent plays a minion, counter it. Sometimes Objection just wins you the game. Like, your opponent can't deal with Objection in certain decks. So it's just really strong. Like, if you're playing against, like, Big Shaman cannot win the game into objection. Straight up. So it's just such a powerful card that it has, like, these, like, non-games that it can force. It, like, it's crazy. It's truly a crazy card. There's also Sleet Skater, 5 mana, 3/4 elemental, miniaturize, battlecry, freeze a enemy minion, gain armor equal to its attack. So Sleet Skater has just become like a gigantic staple for Mage. It's so powerful. You get to freeze a bunch of minions, you gain a shitload of armor. It's great to draw off like Mezzadune, so you can get even more armor. It's easy to tutor because it's elemental. Sleet Skater is going to see play in Mage for like forever. I'm going to be honest. It's one of those kind of cards where it's going to be good in the class for a long, long time. And that's just like what this kind of video feels like to me, right? Where I know I keep saying that like over and over again, but that's how I want people to understand that, like, the reason I'm talking about these cards is because I want to talk about cards that I think will be staples in classes for a long time, and that's why they're played in every deck. Of course, like, there is technically a tempo mage that you can play. Calling it a good deck is a bit of a stretch, but you can play it, and it doesn't really run these cards. But again, it's not that good, right? It's not even like a tier 3 deck, so I don't feel comfortable like making an exception for that, but it is something that there is, like, I have to bring up. Then we have Paladin. I think every single Paladin deck, except for like Odd Paladin, should be running Prismatic Beam. I don't think there's any, or I guess before like aggro was around. Yeah, now aggro is not around, so Paladin's kind of unplayable, but when Paladin is good, it's because aggro is really good, and when aggro is really good, there's no reason to not run Prismatic Beam. 8 mana, deal 3 damage to all enemy minions, cost 1 less for each enemy minion. So it can be like 1 mana, deal 3 damage to all enemy minions. 3 damage is a gigantic breakpoint that is really important for dealing with like early game minions. It's just so strong, this card, Prismatic Beam, especially before Showdown was nerfed, because Showdown, I would have said Showdown should go in every deck as well before it was nerfed. When it was 2 mana, it definitely should have, but at 3 mana, I can understand not running it. It's a little slow. But at 2 mana, when Showdown was, it was 2 mana, summon 3 3/3s for both players. Yours have Rush, I think is the exact wording. When Showdown was 2 mana, like, you had to run that in every deck. It was so powerful. It synergizes so well with the Prismatic Beam. It's so good with, like, other cards that are based on, like, minions on board, like Ziliax. Just such a powerful card. At 3 mana, I can understand not running it. Call to Arms sees play in, like, everything. Even Paladin runs Call to Arms. Aggro Paladins run Call to Arms. Combo Paladins can run Call to Arms. It's just such a powerful card. Call to Arms, like... Call to Arms is, like, one of the most powerful cards in Paladin of all time. It got nerfed in Standard because it was so powerful. It didn't get reverted for, like, a long time because it was so powerful. It's just huge staple for the class. I think that, like... How do I put this? I think it would be fair to say that Call to Arms is one of, if not the best Paladin cards of all time. Like, I feel like that's not that crazy of a statement to make. That it's at least, like, top 5, maybe top 3, maybe even top 2, right? The reason I say maybe is because of, like, Prismatic Beam. Like, Prismatic Beam Showdown, that combination is just so powerful. It's so good. Like, seriously, when Showdown got nerfed, even Paladin just died, because, like, Showdown was such a good card and so, like, integral to the deck that losing Showdown killed even Paladin completely. And then lastly, we have Lord Barov. There's no Paladin deck that shouldn't be running Lord Barov. Just, there isn't one. Like, even Paladin can't run it, so that's the difference, but any, like, Paladin deck should run Lord Barov. Aggro Paladins, I mean, I guess they kind of can't, but there aren't aggro Paladins. They haven't really existed in a while. There's mid-range Paladins that run Lord Barov. There's control Paladins that run Lord Barov, stuff like that. So I think Barov, there's even combo Paladins that run Barov, right? It's just such a powerful removal. 3 mana, 3/2. Battlecry, set the health of all other minions to 1. Death Rattle, deal 1 damage to all minions. Just such a powerful removal card. I don't know a better way to describe this card. It's just so good. I'm not putting it on the... I'm not putting dual class cards on the other classes slide for almost any other class, but Barov definitely should go in Warrior as well. I mean, I guess most classes should have their dual class cards. I just wanted to put them in one class because, well, they're really good, and some classes do get more benefit than others. Paladin, I would say, is more reliant on Barov than Warrior is, because Warrior just has more removal. It's not that Barov is bad in Warrior, it's that, like, it's just more more reliant in Paladin, is kind of what I'm trying to get at. Then we have Priest. So, God, there's so many Priest cards that could go on this list. So, Dark Bishop Benedictus is in every single Priest deck aside from Miracle Priest. I mean, I guess Boar Priest technically exists, but Boar Priest is terrible, so I'm not going to count it. But Benedictus goes in Shadow Priest, it goes in Arena Priest, and it's really good. It's really strong. 5 mana, 5/6, start a game. If the spells in your deck are all Shadow, enter Shadow Form. So Shadow Form just gives you the 2 mana, deal 2 hero power, kind of like the odd Mage hero power, basically. Or I guess if you know what Shadow Form is, you already know. But Benedictus is just so strong. Like, yes, Shadow Priest is bad right now, but again, that's because, aggro, or like, Distributor got nerfed, so aggro is kind of unplayable. Fucking Renethal, dude. Actually fucking Renethal, man. Where was I? But yeah, so you see the only priest deck that isn't running Benedictus is like a Miracle Priest. And, Miracle Priests were always running Radiant Elemental, but then it got nerfed because of Lightspeed, the new card that's coming out. Instead of just making it so repeatable this turn effects can't cost 0, they nerf Radiant Elemental, which is really annoying. Don't get me wrong, I hate Radiant Elemental. I think it should have been nerfed on the merit of the card being broken, not on the merit of the card being broken with a combo that they could have prevented, right? But, so I can't really talk about Radiant Elemental anymore. Cathedral of Anointment is a 3 mana location with 3 durability, give a minion +2/+1, and draw a card. This sees play in every single, deck that runs Benedictus as well. Reno Priest runs it, Shadow Priest ran it for a long time. I still think they should, because they don't have that much card draw, and it's just such a powerful draw card that it gives a lot of stats, it pushes a lot of damage. I think Cathedral is really strong, and it's like, Priest card draw is so bad for, non-Miracle Priest, that Cathedral of Anointment just does so much. It buffs your minions, makes it harder to clear, it pushes a lot of damage, right? You can push at 6 damage from a 3 mana card, it draws 3 cards, it's just such a powerful card in, everything it does. I think that, how would I put this? If you could run Cathedral of Anointment in Miracle Priest, I think you would, right? It's just so useful. Miracle Priest can't really run it because it's not really, you can't discount it in any way, and it's too expensive, and they don't need the card draw as much, so I guess you technically wouldn't run it, but there is that. Then there's Funnel Cake. So the reason I didn't put Funnel Cake in the Druid slide is because there's a billion different combo Druids that don't run Funnel Cake. However, the only combo Priest, Miracle Priest, always runs Funnel Cake. So 1 mana spell, restore 3 health to a minion and its neighbors. For each one overhealed, refresh a mana crystal. 1 mana, trigger any heal or overheal effect, get 3 mana. Yeah, it's no surprise that this card is obviously going to see play in every deck. They brought back Crimson Clergy into Wild, and Funnel Cake plus Crimson Clergy is not balanced, not even remotely. I don't know why they did that. I don't know why they printed Funnel Cake. It's one of the most disgustingly unbalanced cards ever. It's so broken. It's so broken, dude. But yeah, with Clergy, Funnel Cake just draws a billion cards. You have infinite mana. You can keep discounting with Nazmani, which is what people are doing. It's just so gross, truly so gross. And every combo priest, every Miracle Priest from now until infinity should be running Funnel Cake. And I don't think that's I don't think that's a hot take. I think Funnel Cake will see play 10 years from now. It's such a crazy card. And then we have Raise Dead. So this is one of I think I put Raise Dead on the Warlock side as well. Raise Dead should go in every priest deck. I don't think there's a single priest deck that doesn't run Raise Dead, straight up. I think Miracle Priest runs Raise Dead. I think Shadow Priest runs Raise Dead. Arena Priest runs Raise Dead. It's just such a powerful card. 0 mana Shadow spell, deal 3 damage to your hero, return 2 friendly minions that died this game to your hand. Super simple. It's still a 0 mana spell, so it can trigger any effects like Nazmani. It can get you in the past, you would use it to get Radiant Elementals back in Miracle Priest. In Arena Priest, you use it for value. In Shadow Priest, you use it because it's effectively card draw. It's 0 mana, draw 2 in Shadow Priest. Effectively, since, you're bringing back cards that you would have played anyway in your Pirates and stuff like that. So it's really strong. I'm surprised that Raise Dead has never been nerfed. I'm going to be honest with you. It's I think that, straight up, there is no deck in priests that shouldn't be running Raise Dead, and there's only like a handful of decks in Warlock that shouldn't be running Raise Dead, and that's like even Warlock specifically, because even Warlock can't really make use of it because, well, you're going to be resurrecting like giants, and you can't really play those, and like tokens, right? So it's not that great. Raise Dead's just so powerful. It's such an absurdly powerful card in Priest. Getting so much value from it, it's just... I'm just genuinely so shocked that Raise Dead never has been nerfed. Like, as a 0 mana spell, it's so powerful. Then we have Rogue. So, Rogue has some of the most efficient card draw and mana cheat in the entire game. You have cards like Preparation, which are 0 mana, the next spell you cast this turn costs 2 less. Swindle, 2 mana, draw a spell, combo in a minion. Gear Shift, shuffle the 2 leftmost cards into your hand, into your deck, draw 3 cards. This is, like, absurdly efficient. I would have put Secret Passage on here, but Passage... like, just got nerfed, and when it was at 1 mana, it was in every deck. Like, there was literally no deck that didn't run Secret Passage. Some decks didn't run Gear Shift, right? And Gear Shift was still, like, the second most played card, I think, because some decks also didn't run Prep. But there's no deck in the game was not running Secret Passage in Rogue. Not a single one. I think also Prep was in every deck. I think so. But, like, this is a twofold thing. Yes, Rogue has a lot of cards that see play in almost every Rogue deck, but then, well, they don't really have anything else, right? I've had this conversation recently with, like, a couple Rogue players, is that, like, yeah, Rogue has the best card draw and the best mana chain in the game. They just do. But when you talk about anything else, Rogue kind of just, like, doesn't have it. Rogue doesn't have, like, any kind of win conditions. Like, the only Rogue win condition that really exists is, like, Garrote. And yeah, Garrote's really strong, but, like, that's it, right? Like, yeah, you could play, like, it's really weird that they just haven't done anything like that. Rogue has terrible removal, terrible, like, generation for board, it has terrible value. It's all this stuff, it's, like, really bad, right? But because its card draw is so strong, like, it doesn't matter that what it does is actually kind of weaker than other classes in a lot of scenarios, right? Because, well, okay, so what if you're doing weaker stuff on board if you just have more stuff to play? If you're playing more cards than your opponent, it doesn't matter if each card is individually weaker, which is kind of the thing about Rogue. Hunter has always been the opposite, right? Individual Hunter cards were, like, pushed to be more powerful to make up for the fact that you couldn't draw cards, which is kind of really toxic, I'm gonna be honest with you. I can understand why people don't like Face Hunter, because, well, the cards were just objectively stronger than other classes. For, like, multiple eras of Face Hunter, they just were stronger than what other classes had in those, like, mana slots. And the idea is, well, okay, you just get access to them less often. It's really hard to balance that, and I think that's why they've started to move away from, like, Face Hunter. It's really sad, don't get me wrong, but we're talking about Rogue. Rogue just... I remember, so when Miracle Rogue was around, the gag was that every single Rogue deck ran, like, the same, like, 20 cards and then changed out 10, because, well, that's what it felt like, right? But after, you know, Passage was nerfed, Miracle Rogue was nerfed, stuff like that, the Rogue decks have become a little more refined, I want to say, because they can't run Passage, and without Passage, well, things like Counterfeit Coin lose a lot of value, and, well... without Counterfeit Coin, a lot of other cards lose a lot of value, like Ghostly Strike and Gone Fishing and stuff like that, right? Because you can't combo them as easily and as early into the game. It's really sad that Rogue is in this kind of state. Don't get me wrong, I hate that Rogue draws a billion cards and plays more cards in one turn than I play in the entire game. I hate that. But we don't change that by nerfing Rogue cards. We change that by giving Rogue cards that it can actually play and are actually strong on, like, at doing different things than just drawing a mana cheat. And Blizzard is not doing that. They actively refuse to do that, and it's really sad. I'm gonna be honest with you, it's really, really sad. So, Shaman is probably the class I would say does not work in this video. Every Shaman deck does not run the same cards. So, how do I put this? Over the last, like, 2-3-ish years, there have been a bunch of different Shaman decks. We have Even Shaman, Nature, or Frog, Shaman, Big Shaman, Shutter Shaman, Questline Shaman, you know, stuff like that, right? And almost none of these decks run the same cards. Some of them have similar cards, right? Like Shutter Shaman and Even Shaman both run Needle Rock Totem, right? It's a 0 mana 2, it's a 2 mana 0 attack 2 health totem with at the end of your turn, draw a card and gain 2 armor. Both of those decks run that card, right? But Frog, Big, I don't even know, Evolve Shaman, like, they don't run those cards, right? But, you know, Big Shaman and Shudderwock Shaman both run Fairy Tale Forest, which is a 3-mana location, draw a Battlecry card from your deck. It costs 1 less to durability. Both of those run those cards, but Frog Shaman and even Shaman don't run those, right? Well, let's see, I can't think. But that's kind of what I'm getting at, right? Shaman has by far the most deck diversity of any class in the game, which is crazy. I wouldn't have thought that until I was making this video. I didn't really consider that Shaman does just have the most deck diversity, where the Shaman has so many different decks you can play. It has aggro decks, it has big decks, it has combo decks, it has slow control decks. I guess, well, slow combo decks is what it really is. And that's not something any other class has. No other class has this many, like, kind of decks you can play. So it makes sense that, like, that Shaman is so spread thin on, like, cards that it runs across its entire, like, class. So, like, I get that, right? It's not like Demon Hunter, where there are only 2 decks that can be played, and they both run the same card in Mana Burn, right? It's not like Druid, where every Druid deck is actually the same kind of deck. They're all just combo decks. So they're all running, like, Aquatic Form because it's super efficient draw, right? Like, the Druid decks are the Shaman decks are just actually so different that, like, it doesn't really fit in this kind of video, so I'm gonna move on. The cards that I put up are just Shudderwock, Sphere of the Frog, Monk Morpher, and Anchor Totem. I'm not gonna read them off because they don't really fit the theme of the video, but let's move past this. Then we get to Warlock. So Warlock is, like I was saying, with Priest, should always be running Raised Dead in, like, every deck. Discard Warlock runs Raised Dead, Pain Warlock runs Raised Dead, Reno Warlock runs would run Raised Dead, but Reno Warlock is unplayable. The only, like, real Warlock deck that doesn't run Raised Dead is Even Warlock. Even Warlock, like, hasn't been that good in, like, a year or so. I put a few years, but no, it was good, like, kind of recently. But it doesn't run Raised Dead. So there is that. I guess Even Warlock also doesn't fit Kobold Librarian. Every single Warlock deck aside from Even Warlock runs Kobold Librarian also. 1 mana, 2/1, Battlecry, draw a card, deal 2 damage to your hero. I don't think there's any Warlock deck in the last, like, 6 or 7 years that hasn't wanted to run Kobold Librarian. Because I think even Warlock wants to run Kobold Librarian is the thing. It just actually can't because, well, the deck restriction. Kobold Librarian is just, it's one of the best 1-drops ever printed. It's so crazy. It's one of the best class cards ever printed. It's so powerful, and it's such a basic effect. It's a 1 mana 2/1 draw card. Like, what a basic, like, normal effect. Yeah, you take 2 damage. Oh boy. It's technically a downside, right? Ooh boy. But no, Warlock makes great use of being able to take damage, right? You have Pain Warlock that's been really good, and I mean, obviously Seedlock, right? I think that, like, I genuinely think that there is no Warlock deck that hasn't wanted to run Kobold Librarian since the card has come out. Like, even decks that can't run it want to run it, right? Is what I'm trying to get at. Because it's just such an efficient card. Like, Darkest Hour Warlock, right? It couldn't run Kobold Librarian, but it definitely wanted to. Wheel Warlock ran Kobold Librarian. Like, every S-tier Warlock deck has run Kobold Librarian, aside from Darkest Hour, I think. Mecha'thun ran it. Sorry, Mecha'thun wasn't an S-tier Warlock deck, but it did run it. Mecha'thun ran it. Snip Snap ran it. Discard Warlock runs it. Seedlock runs it. Stealer of Souls Warlock ran it. It's just such an incredibly powerful card. It's super iconic for the class. I think that if Kobold Librarian ever got nerfed, it would be like if fucking Ice Block got nerfed at this point, right? Where, like, it's been so integral to the game itself for so long that it seems almost impossible for them to nerf it, right? Because it's just such an incredibly useful and powerful card. It's not like it's broken, right? It's not like it needed to ever be nerfed, but it's just such a staple, strong card that, like, I genuinely don't think they could ever make a card that is, like, on the same level as Kobold Librarian. I really don't think they could do it in today's game. And, like, I don't know. It's just so weird. It's just such a good card. And then we get to Warrior. So for Warrior is another one of those classes similar to Mage, where if you asked me, like, a few months ago, it would have only been the Skipper Shell, right? Because the Skipper Shell was in every single deck, because only Skipper decks were really playable for Warrior. But recently, almost entirely because of Perils in Paradise, we've been able to play like a Reno Warrior in Wild. It's kind of not that good now that aggro doesn't exist, but it was playable in Perils in Paradise, right? Because of cards like Marin the Manager, you could get what is his name? Home? I don't even remember his name. Whatever, the Druid Taurus, you would get some Druid cards and stuff like that, right? Which is really powerful. And, I mean, it's only been, like, recently that Reno Warrior's actually been playable. Like, this expansion, even last expansion, it wasn't playable, right? And probably won't be playable this, like, in the Great Dark Beyond either, but... So, the cards that I've pulled up are Shield Block, 2 mana, gain 5 armor, draw a card. This is in every deck. Straight up. There is no deck that doesn't run Shield Block in Warrior. Like, it's just ultra efficient. There's not really Warrior... I mean, there's no, like, actual playable Warrior decks that aren't really Skipper Warrior or Reno Warrior. And, well, Skipper Warrior and Reno Warrior all run Shield Block. It's similar to, like, what I was talking about for Demon Hunter, right? Where there's only really 2 kinds of deck that see play. And although they are not similar at all, they still only run... Ooh, sorry. I didn't mean to do that. They still run the same card in Shield Block. Razorfin Rockstar is a 1-mana 1/3 Quillbore. After you gain armor, gain 2 more. This, not only is this a Skipper card that is useful in the Skipper combo, but it's also good in, you know, Reno Warrior, because they are playing Odin almost all the time, so Razorfin Rockstar gives you a lot of armor on your Odin turns, gives you a lot of armor just straight up. It just gives you so much armor. It's really useful, and again, like I said, it's a part of the main Skipper combo, which, if you don't know, it's Risky Skipper, then you play Armor Smith, then you play Razorfin Rockstar, then you play a bunch of, like, other minions to get as much armor as possible. If you didn't know that somehow. So Razorfin Rockstar easily fits the criteria for this video, but it's really funny to me that I'm putting Rockstar here instead of Skipper itself, because, yes, Skipper is the most important card in that deck, but it's not played in both decks, so like Rockstar is. And then Stone Skin Armor. There are some Skipper lists that don't run Stone Skin Armor, I will admit, but I think almost all of them do. There are a lot of different Skipper lists, right? You have Odin Skipper, which obviously runs armor, right? You have Solthraze Skipper, you have Gauntlet Skipper, Bladed Gauntlet. Sorry, Solthraze, I should have explained, is the Overkill attack multiple times weapon from Roscon's Rumble. It's a 4/4 Overkill after a hero attacks and kills a minion. Or I guess it's just Overkill after... I can't talk. 6 mana, 4/4 Overkill, your hero can attack again, right? And since Overkill is like after you kill a minion, doing more damage, or I guess it's kill an enemy, because Overkill does work on the enemy hero. It's just if you're overkilling the enemy hero, you won the game, right? So it doesn't really technically count. But so there's that. There's Bladed Gauntlet, Skipper, which is the 3-mana 0/2 weapon where it gains attack equal to your armor but can't attack heroes. So what you do is you give you have like Bloodsail Raiders, and then those get the attack from your Bladed Gauntlet, so you get like really high attack from that, and then you give it charge from either... I guess you can run the charge spell, but typically you play Warsong Commander, which will give minions with 2 or less attack charge, and because of the way that Bloodsail Raider works with its battle cry, it does get charged. There's Mechathune Skipper, where you play Mechathune, you draw through your entire deck, then you Skipper to gain armor, you play Mechathune by... What's it called? You play Chemical Spill, which is a 5-mana spell that will summon the highest cost minion from your deck and deal 5 damage to it. Then you can play Shield Shatter to kill the Mechathune. There's a bunch of different ways to play Skipper, and almost all of them are always playing Stone Skin Armor. 2 mana 2/2 Battle Cry. If your armor changes to turn, draw 2 cards. I don't know if I read that out. But Warrior, Warrior fits the criteria of this video so well, because yes, there are a lot of different Skipper decks, but they all run these cards. And then Reno Warrior, and I guess technically Odin Warrior can be played, but you just play Reno Warrior, also runs these cards. I know this is such a dumb concept for a video, and I know for a lot of people watching, you're like, oh, so what's the point? It's just cards that are really good, right? But I just like to talk about cards that see play everywhere, because it means that, well, if a class has cards that see play in multiple, if not every deck in the class, that means the class has strong staple cards that are grounding it, and you can base the power level of the class on. This is why Hunter was so terrible and Wild for so long, is that it didn't have any cards like this. For a long time, you didn't want to run any Hunter cards, like, in most Hunter decks, right? Beast Hunter was only running specific Beast Hunter cards, right? Reno Hunter was only running specific Reno Hunter cards. So they didn't have any overlap, which meant A, the decks become more expensive because you can't use similar cards, and B, the decks are just so wildly different that if a strong card comes out that only one deck can use, well, the class overall doesn't get that much better, only one deck gets better, right? And again, that's what happened to Hunter for a long time. Now that we have, cards that are coming out that fit in every Hunter deck, well, the class overall is getting stronger, not just one deck. And that's so nice. And that's like what I like to see. I don't want one deck to get better, I want the class to get better. And that's why I like talking about cards that are in every deck for a class, because that means the class has those kind of cards. I know that sounds weird, but that's just how I think about the game, and I feel like a lot of people would appreciate that as well. It's kind of like why I like to make my videos, right? It's how I think of the game and stuff like that. I know there's a little bit of a tangent at the end. It didn't really matter, but it's just something I want to talk about. But yeah, that's gonna be it for me. If you guys enjoyed, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Tell me think down below. Are there any cards that I missed that probably should have gone on this list? I'd love to hear it. There definitely are. I will not lie. There's probably some Druid cards that, definitely could have gone on the Druid slide as well. Maybe, Priest or Warlock, stuff like that, but I digress. I have 2 giveaways going on right now for the Great Dark Beyond. One, all you have to do is like the video, subscribe to my channel, make sure you're subscribed because I can tell, and then comment down below your favorite card that has been revealed so far. And then I have another one that is for members. It's similar to a Twitch subscription. The lowest tier is 99 cents. You do not have to do this at all. It's just something I want to give back to my community, and it gives me a little bit of kickback towards the bundles that I'm paying for myself because I'm not getting anything from Blizzard this expansion. So it does help me a little bit. But I just like having members on my channel because the more members I have, the more emotes I can add, and I like having emotes. I like creating my own emotes. It's really fun, and I don't stream on Twitch, so having them on YouTube is kind of the only thing I can do. Anyway, I'll see you guys next time. Peace out.
Shadows are rising again!
Darker than they've ever been.